man. I'm excited to be on the newly branded Masala
Yeah.
Chai Theology.
Yeah, that's right. Masala Chai Theology.
Amazing.
I think the tagline for this place is um, spicing up your theology with ancient, liberative, Jesus-centered, empire-resisting ways of understanding God and neighbor. And we're going to do just that today with you, Kevin.
Yeah.
You have an exciting book that is out, Hope for the Mission.
Yeah.
Um, Came out a month ago, and there's been a lot of buzz and conversation about it. And I want to help generate more buzz and conversation, which is why I wanted you
Sure.
on. Yeah, man. I mean, you are taking on a very well-intentioned thing that the Western Church does, which is ministering to our unhoused neighbors, but um, often doing it in very colonized ways,
Yeah.
despite having good intentions. And, when I say colonized ways, I'm referring to things I talk about in my book, The Justice of Jesus, um, which is just nice. We've got both books today
That's right.
because
We're both ready.
yeah, they really both go well hand in hand. I mean,
Yeah.
for folks who have enjoyed The Justice of Jesus, Kevin's book, Hope for the Mission, is, I would say, applying the same lens to one specific justice issue that
Yeah.
Christians are engaged in. And, you do an incredible job taking us through the history, pointing out what's broken, what are colonized ways of doing things. And then you also point out to where the hope is, who is getting it right. And you give some positive examples and best practices, and we'll go into all of that here in a second. But
Mhm.
Kevin, tell us a little bit about your book, Hope for the Mission, and give us maybe a little background to yourself too, because
Sure.
I noted in my endorsement for this book that you're not saying what you say as an outsider throwing stones from
Yeah.
the outside. You're saying this as someone who has done the work, has been a practitioner. So yeah, tell us more.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've been both the insider of, evangelical Christian spaces. That's what I grew up in. I went to Bible college and seminary and ended up moving out of that and into homeless services, working
Hmm.
for nonprofits that were non-religious. And so I've sort of been in both worlds. And for the last 10 years or so, I've just been very interested in how those two worlds talk to each other and how they interact in ways that are both helpful and not helpful, what myths exist about both worlds,
Hmm.
um, in from one to the other. And my work more recently has been to try to bring those worlds closer together, right? For people of faith to engage homelessness uh, more and better, and for folks who are homelessness service providers to maybe take another look at the church as a partner. Um, at the same time, it did require sort of a mending of what was clearly a wound, um, in those worlds, and how the service providers that I was a part of thought of religious services and churches and how they treated people. And it's a
Hmm.
very complicated relationship. And there's sort of this sense like, oh, we know that our people go to that church on Wednesdays for their meal, and they go to this other church on Mondays for showers, but those are their churches doing their own thing, and we're over here in the service provider world, and kind of this siloed understanding. But the reason for it was that there had been a lot of hurt, right? And that there
Hmm.
was the sort of dominant way that folks think of a Christian response to homelessness comes from an institution called gospel rescue missions. And gospel rescue missions have a long history of prioritizing evangelism over service, of making folks participate in religious programming in order to get their basic needs met, um, applying a very narrow um, worldview on people in order to give them services. and so that is part of what caused this rift. And so, in my first book, I
Mm,
explored that a little bit, but was just more interested in helping Christians understand what homelessness was and what it wasn't. But for this book, I really wanted to talk about that relationship. And at first, I thought that meant I was going to write a whole book about rescue missions and why their approach is wrong and why it matters. And then along the way, I just realized I don't want to write that book. I wouldn't want to read that book. I don't want to write or read a book that's all about what's going wrong, right?
mm,
Instead, I wanted to write a book about how to get it right. And along the way, I encountered and met so many amazing people of faith and churches and faith-based nonprofits who were doing amazing work. And so in encountering one particular narrative, I wanted to uplift another one. And
mm.
so, as you said, kind of in your um, opening, this book is actually like three quarters stories about folks getting it right, and
Mm.
only a little bit at the beginning about the rescue mission model and why I think that's wrong and what its origins were and kind of where along the way it lost the
Yeah.
sauce a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Let me actually ask you about that because,
Yeah.
I say this in my book, but unless we understand what's broken, we can't really bring healing to our world today. And I know that, so many of us have been shaped by empire to be really uncomfortable when we talk about history and we
Yeah.
talk about what we've gotten wrong. So, and I want to make sure we don't skip past that part,
Yeah.
but we use it as a foundation to then, cast hope for the mission, as your book is titled. So, tell us maybe a little bit of, without giving too much away, because we still
Yeah.
want people to go buy the book, Hope for the
Sure.
Mission, and get it wherever you get your books. But maybe tell us a little bit about some of the history. How did we get here, and why is there this need that so many well-intentioned Christians feel when it comes to we need to convert their souls, and only then can we justify feeding them and housing them. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, so that was my favorite part of the book to write, and it's the part I wrote last was because it required so much historical work and a lot of reading, and I'm not a historian. And so I think I say that in the book too, like, I'm not claiming to be writing the definitive history, but
Mm,
my research led me in some really interesting ways, and, primarily, it led me to the Gilded Age, here in
mm,
America, where we saw toward the end of the 19th century just this huge amassing of wealth coming out of the Civil War, with the railway system. Um, this is when like what the Great Gatsby is written about, right? These few individuals who had immense wealth at the expense of so many who were impoverished. Um,
mhm.
at the same time, because of the railway system, poverty had this new ability to sort of be transient in a way, right? Like folks could hop on a train and say like, "Hey, it's not really working in my town. I'm gonna go up to New York because I heard there's opportunity there. I'm gonna go out, out west and because I've heard that you can get seasonal work there, right?" And
Mhm.
so a lot of what first started to emerge and then got codified into a lot of our homelessness response today is a reaction to there are new folks coming into our town who we believe aren't our responsibility, and they're poor and they're slumming, and so we've got to do something about that, which is sort of there's a truthful aspect to that, and it's a very convenient excuse that we still use today, to say like, "Oh, these people don't belong to us," right? I hear this
Mhm.
all the time in my work. More often when I was in California, it was like, "Oh, these homeless people just come here because the weather's nice." When every time we study it, like over 85% of people who experience homelessness do so in the same city that they were last housed, right?
Wow.
So there's some of that mixed in there too to sort of excuse the amassing of wealth by a few. And so that's where we first see the first poor laws, the first vagrancy laws, the first poor houses, which were essentially like workhouses, and essentially what folks got either sent to jail or the workhouse, and folks that experienced both said there wasn't much difference, right?
Mhm.
Um, where that started to infiltrate the church was through some theologies that I think we now kind of describe as prosperity gospel,
Mm,
kind of had their origin around this time of certain very influential theologians arguing that it was a very Christian thing to do to become wealthy and to start associating wealth with blessing and therefore to associate poverty with curse. Um, and so
mhm,
all of that theologically is in the mix. And it's not to say that those were the only voices, right? This is the same period of time where the social gospel comes out of. And a lot of folks that have influenced, like me and you and some of our mentors, right? This idea that God isn't just concerned solely with the salvation of your individual soul, but about making earth more like it is in heaven, right? That there was a movement around the same time to provide that provided this counter voice. And so where that all kind of came in is around the founding of the first rescue mission in New York, and the coming of the Salvation Army from overseas into the United States with these ideas of poverty being not just not a result of social conditions or um, economic policies, but a moral crisis that
mm,
our cities were facing that required then a religious and moral response. What's interesting is again there were faith-based alternatives. So if you think about uh, Jane Addams and the start of the settlement houses, that was for her an explicitly theological movement, right? Like she believed and her followers believed that it wasn't the individual who is at fault for poverty, it was the environment. And it's very influenced by the social gospel, right? But today, when we learn about Jane Addams, we learn about her as a founder of the social work movement, sort of
mhm,
divorced from her faith. But rescue missions got this sort of baptized as the Christian origins of poverty response. I was talking about this a couple weeks ago, and I made the joke that it was like the evangelical got Jesus in the divorce, right?
mm,
And so forever there have been alternate Christian ways of viewing poverty and responding to homelessness, but they get sort of treated as secular or as fringe.
mm,
And instead, this very dominant movement of rescue missions survived and grew and expanded under this, would say, toxic theology that poverty was not the result of bad policy or social circumstances or political realities, but a moral failure, a moral rot that needs a moral response. And we see that now infecting all of our approach to poverty. And it's not just Christians. It's that
mm,
idea is everywhere, right? That if you're homeless, it's because you're a drug addict. It's because you're lazy, you don't wanna get a job, and I can tell you anecdotally, having met thousands of people, that that's not true, but that
yeah,
myth is so pervasive, and it comes just from this very Christian, Western, Protestant idea that, um, wealth is a sign of blessing and poverty is a sign of curse.
mm. And you're so right about the diagnosis, I think, because, um, it really is rotten theology at its core, right?
Yeah.
Like, just this understanding that, um I mean, I just think of Jesus saying, "Blessed are the poor,"
Yeah.
right? The Beatitudes. And when Jesus said that the poor, when Jesus said that blessed are the poor, he wasn't saying the poor will be blessed one day. He was saying that the poor are already blessed because
Yeah.
God is on their
Present
side.
tense. Yeah.
Present tense, exactly.
Yeah.
But yet, because of um, our theology being colonized and co-opted by empire, we you know, throw away Jesus's teachings of sell everything you have and give to the poor and become like the poor, right? Like
Yeah.
identify with the poor in solidarity. We've thrown that away, and what we've done is we've let our empire-shaped imaginations paint the rich as the good and poor people as people without virtue, and we end up essentially preserving status quo and preserving the hierarchies imposed by empire,
Yeah.
and hurting the people made poor and oppressed by empire, especially our
Yeah.
unhoused neighbor because of this. So I think what you're inviting us to do here is to ask these deeper questions of why is it that we idolize the rich and the powerful and we demonize and vilify the poor and the unhoused neighbor and the unhoused migrant. Like I was just talking even this morning with a friend of mine in Baltimore who serves on the front lines, his unhoused neighbors there, and
Mhm.
he was like, they are terrified in the current American
Yeah.
empire. They are terrified, especially those of them, without documented status.
Yeah.
And they're on the margins, and the church should be standing and sitting in solidarity with them. But instead, we're on the side of the rich and the powerful who want to deport them, and not deal with them, and not engage with them in a Christ-like way, not bring healing to them, but just push them away. Not my problem anymore, you know,
Yeah.
and not really care for what happens after them. I mean, it's so inhumane, and it's so sad that deportations are also affecting so many of our unhoused neighbors right now. But
Yeah.
I think it all comes down to this idea of even people who are poor and working class being tricked by people
Yes.
with power and riches, that that person is your enemy because empires divide and conquer, but the gospel of Christ unites to heal, right? So where is the healing here that we're bringing as the church? And I love that you painted that picture, that diagnosis for us of what's broken. Before I hop into my next question here, Kevin, I just want to say, folks watching online, if you have a question for Kevin about this
Yeah.
book, or a question for us about decolonizing, the homelessness service ministry model, go ahead and drop that in the chat, and
Please.
we'd love to get to your questions. I'd love to have Kevin answer your questions. But Kevin, tell us a little bit about um, you know the the hope you're seeing. The book
Yeah.
is titled "Hope for the Mission," and it is very um, prognostic. It's also very truthful and blunt, which I appreciate. I mean, you even say things like, "Yeah, look, like I get that, you know." People are well intentioned, but intentions don't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They hurt our neighbors. So maybe tell us a little bit about that first, and then
Sure.
we'll move to the hope.
Yeah, and talk about a paragraph that I probably rewrote the most in the entire
Mm,
book because it was even more blunt in other versions of it, right? But just because anytime you talk about this stuff, right, and the notion that well, it's you shouldn't be rude to these folks because they're doing their best. They mean well. They're trying to help. It's better than folks who don't care and aren't trying to help, right? And what I say to that is, you know, I'm sorry, but intention is meaningless, right?
mm,
It's the impact that matters. And I think at one point I had the example that's like, if you hit someone with your car, like it doesn't matter if you didn't mean to, they still got hit by a car, right? The the impact doesn't change. it might matter in some sense, like later in court, like, but to the person who was hit, who was impacted literally, it doesn't matter. And what focusing on intention does is it focuses on the the server instead of the person being served. It
Mm.
centers them and
Mm.
decenters the person who this is all supposed to be about, right?
Wow.
And so it's by refusing to give any space to intention. And actually, what I said was, you know, I didn't say it this way, but like I could write a whole chapter about why I don't even think their intentions are good. But
Mm.
actually, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna assume that everyone's intentions are good. Like,
Mm.
and that's giving a lot of grace, right? Because I don't think that's always true, but I think
Mm.
it is true a lot more of the time. But I also don't know. I can't prove that their intentions are good. What I
Mm.
can prove is what the impact is, right?
Yes.
And so it's not a worthwhile conversation to talk about intention, and
Mm.
all it ultimately serves as is a distraction from the impact.
Wow.
So
Wow.
so
That's
you
so
were
good.
yeah. So you
Yeah.
asked me
Yeah.
about hope though, right? And
Yes. Yes. Tell us about
um
hope. We're on the
yeah,
subject.
it was funny because the title "Hope for the Mission" came late. We had a
Mm.
lot of different titles, and the title was the hardest part. And when that got pitched to me, I was like, "Oh yeah, this book is about hope," and I didn't even realize it. And when I reread during one of the many editing phases, right, once I read it through the lens that that was the title, I realized that hope was already all over this book.
Mm.
And I drew it out a little bit more now that it was in the title and named it a little bit more, but it was already there.
Wow.
And something really important to me was to name that hope isn't just the later chapters that talk about what's going right, that calling out what's wrong is an act of hope, right?
Mm.
And I borrowed this from Cole Arthur Riley, who is just literally my favorite writer on the planet.
Mm.
Um, and I quote it in this book, but she says, "Lament is not anti-hope."
Wow.
Um, and then goes on to say, and I'm going to botch the wording of it, but that um, because lament is a emotional, visceral reaction to the way things are, knowing that they shouldn't be that way, right? And if you know that things shouldn't be that way, that means you have hope. Because
Right.
if you're not lamenting, then you believe that everything's fine or you just don't care. But if you can lament, if you can point out what's wrong, that means that you have hope for a version of things where things are right.
Wow.
And so for me, even those first 2 chapters that are about what's going wrong are still chapters about hope, because we can
Mm.
name what's going wrong and still be very hopeful, because calling something wrong is an act of hope.
Mm. That's so good, man. Thanks for that reorientation. And what you're saying is profoundly Christian. It's profoundly biblical. It's all over the Bible, right? Lament. There's a space for lament throughout the scriptures, throughout the Psalms, which were the prayers of the people of God in the church. And um, yeah, no, it's fascinating that we tend to divorce hope from lament, but
Yeah.
um, unless we lament, we can't hope. Unless we
Yeah.
grieve, unless we weep, and we see Jesus weeping, right? Unless we weep, there's no resurrection.
Right.
We see in the story of Lazarus, where Jesus weeps, and then there's resurrection, right?
Yeah.
And that's the season we're in right now, liturgically, right? We're in the season of Lent. It's a season of lament. There's a whole calendar throughout the year that's a whole cycle in the Christian liturgical calendar that's devoted just to the hopeful act of lament. Um, I feel like the empires of our day don't want us to lament. They don't want us to lean into Lent because that upsets the status quo, that gets people asking questions and reimagining new realities than the neatly packed empire shaped realities presented to us, the binaries.
Mhm.
But that's really good that you ground us in. Um, hope by telling us that no, lament is a big part of hope. So, man, I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
Um, let's jump to the questions in the chat here. We're getting one really good question so far, and if others have questions, do throw in your questions. We'd love for Kevin to answer them too. But first question is from KS, who says, "We have been taught that if we tithe to the church would take care of the homeless. We don't know how to take care of the homeless."
Mm,
Um, that man, that's so good. Yeah, what are your thoughts? How would you respond to that,
yeah.
Kevin?
I mean, I think the church has a really key role to play in addressing homelessness, and that's a lot of what the book is about, right? Is
Mm,
finding what our rightful place is and what the opportunities there are. But yeah, I would agree. Like uh, the church isn't the full answer to this issue,
mm,
right? Like we need professionals in all sorts of spaces and modalities to help because ultimately homelessness is simple and complex at the same time. It's as simple as the fact that folks need a home, and also the reason that people experience homelessness is that they've fallen through the cracks of all of our broken systems, right?
mm,
And different people come through different broken systems, and some of those intersect with one another, and and have a cumulative effect on a person. And so we need professionals in all sorts of uh, ways working on this, and we need a lot more funding, honestly, than
mm,
churches could probably provide on their own. So, um, I steal this quote from a buddy of mine who he just once said this in conversation. I told him later I use this quote on the all the time. He's like, I don't even remember saying that, but that sounds like me. He said, "I don't think that the church is going to be the one to end homelessness, but I know that we won't do it without them." Right,
mm.
and so that's kind of a guiding mission that, like, if you're
Wow.
if the church that you're going to really wants to, like, get involved with homelessness, that is a great reason to tithe to that church, right?
Mhm,
But it has never proven to be the case even when we were at the absolute pinnacle of church attendance and probably tithe dollars, it did not result in a marked decrease in homelessness, right? Because
mhm,
churches didn't see that as the priority of what to do with their dollars. And that's not to say that, churches didn't do anything good with those dollars, right? There are other issues to tackle. But clearly, this notion that it's the church's job to solve homelessness, I mean, cool, do it. No?
yeah.
Okay, then we'll do it without you, or we're gonna keep asking, or we're gonna lean on other partners as well to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's quite sad that, because of the anti-blackness that you see in America, the history of the United States, around the civil rights movement and all that, um, it's almost like social services has been vilified, so much because of that blackness. And it was actually Lisa Sharon Harper who was sharing this with me in a conversation, but
Mhm.
she was like, yeah, but the reality is that it's hurting poor white folks in America too.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
social services being cut, SNAP benefits being cut, Medicare, Medicaid being cut. It hurts white folks in America. It hurts poor white folks all across America and the Rust Belt and the Appalachians, but instead, this is what empires do. They divide and conquer, right?
Yeah,
So people are voting against their own interests, their own community's interests,
yeah,
because they are so filled with fear and hatred towards another set of marginalized neighbors, and they don't want the refugee or the immigrant getting social services. They don't want people who they believe are cheating to get social services, get those social services. And then what ends up happening is the people who need it the most, including from their own communities, get hurt, right? And
yeah,
it's so heartbreaking. Um, I appreciate that perspective so much, Kevin. Jeff here says that the introduction alone for Kevin's book, Hope for the Mission, in case you're just joining us, Jeff says that the introduction alone was worth the book's purchase price, and
Wow.
I would
Thank you.
fully agree with that. I love that people have been reading this, have been encouraged by it,
Uh,
and just as a just as a heads up, if you have read the book or if you plan on reading the book, both Kevin's book or my book, The Justice of Jesus, I would just say leave a review.
yes.
Reviews help
Seriously.
so much after you buy the book, and it just helps other people find copies of the book. So leave a review on Amazon, Goodreads, Bookshop, wherever you leave your reviews, Google. That is one of the most helpful things you can do to support a book that has helped you in your journey so much. Kevin, I'm looking at the list of endorsers here for your book. We've got Zach Lambert endorsing it, Shannon Martin, who I just got to spend some time at Yale with a couple of weeks ago. Sandhya Rani Jha. I love that I'm not the only South Asian endorsing this book.
Yes.
Love that you have more than one Indian friend doing good work in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I endorse the book as well. I just had to. It was so powerful. Amy Kenny, Sarah Fisher, so many good folks the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, Liz Theo Harris. I mean,
Yeah.
you got a great list of endorsees here. And, when you're asked to endorse a
And
book, you don't know who else is endorsing. I was happy to be the only
yeah.
one. If I ended up, I knew I wouldn't be the only one, but I was happy to, just knowing you and knowing this book. But it is so great to see the others who've also jumped on, with endorsements for Hope for the Mission. Yeah, tell us a little bit about, because I know we've got some writers here as well,
Yeah.
people,
Sure.
and what I've noticed about my audience, I'm sure this is true to a degree with your audience too, is that my audience tends to be people who are practitioners, people who are
Yep.
doing the
Yep.
work of justice, and often feel lonely in their
Yeah.
pursuit of justice as a Christian because the church doesn't offer much language, theology support. So they come, looking for voices like you and I, Kevin, to encourage them in their journeys of being practitioners. But you know, I'm so curious because I know that there are practitioners here who also want to write
Mhm.
and maybe even write their own books at some point, their own areas of expertise. What has your journey as an author looked like, especially being a practitioner turned
Yeah.
author? What has that looked like for you, and what encouragement and advice would you have for other justice practitioners who are trying to share wisdom and insight from their work
Mhm.
that the world needs so much from a faith perspective?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That this could be a whole separate conversation that I feel like we should have at some point. Because gosh, we need so many more writers on these things, and we need it to be, like you said, from the people actually doing the work. And we need way more writing from the folks who are actually impacted by these things, right?
Mm,
Like I would love for there to be a Christian book on homelessness written by somebody who's actually experienced homelessness. Now we do have some of those books. We need more of them, right? Folks who are currently experiencing it, right?
mm,
Like, um, th- s- so yeah, advice I would give or my journey. I mean, at some point I decided I wanted to write this, and um, I hate to say this, so much of it is waiting, so much of it is
mhm,
timing, so much of it is luck, or just the right connection at the right time. But I think what I would tell people is just write, just start writing.
mm,
Um, and even if you don't feel like you can write about that thing yet, start writing about something else. I mean, I started a blog while I was in college and deconstructing my theology. It was just me processing through stuff I was learning. And like the first
mm,
time that I started questioning a traditional hell, I wrote a blog post about it. And it was like, like I cringe looking back at those writings, but I'd post them on my Facebook and people would read them and people would be really kind to me about it and ask questions. There's an entire period of time where I thought that my writing career was gonna be about movies, and, like, I was writing movie reviews, and I wanted to write a book about, like, faith and film, um, and I did that, and I've the number of blogs that I have owned is shocking, but it kept me writing, and
Mm.
um, it kept me honing my craft. Bad writing is better than no writing, right? Um, and so that by the time that I knew that I wanted to write this book, even before it was a book, um, I I would start writing stories that I was experiencing,
Mhm.
right? I would experience something at work and go, "Oh, this story is a really good example of this myth or
Mm.
a really good like counter to this myth." So I would just write that story and I saved it in a file that I said one day when I write this book, I might use this story. And most of them I did end up using in my first book.
Wow.
And so I just don't stop writing. And the people that like your writing now may stick with you and you may totally change audiences, but just write.
That's good, man. Yeah, that's so good. Just write, and Substack's a great place to write
Yeah.
and start
Yeah.
building a email newsletter list. I mean, you and I know this, but when we're pitching books, publishers want to know how many emails do you have. Like that's a question of its own, and it's it's more than it carries more weight than social media
Yeah.
followers. But people who are giving you their emails,
Yeah.
are curious and want to be going in deeper. Yeah.
Mhm. If we've learned anything in recent years, the social media landscape can change suddenly and drastically. And so having an email newsletter, I had MailChimp and I switched to Substack, but you can move your mail list over. You can't move your followers from one platform to another, you know?
Right.
So,
Right. No,
yeah.
that's good, man. Yeah. I mean, you and I learned the hard way
Good
with
good
like Twitter
insider info,
influencers.
yeah.
So, no, that's great, and, I know that before I became a published author, I'd be listening to folks, like you and Karen Swallow Prior and, others, talking about their experiences writing books, and, I picked up so much wisdom from there, so I appreciate you being able to share some of that with, our people here, tuning into
Yeah,
this conversation or recorded conversation or podcast. But,
yeah,
yeah, Kevin, what are you what are you hopeful about right now? What do you
yeah.
feel like, um, is happening that gives you hope when it comes to, ending homelessness and the Christian response to it?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. What comes to mind for you in that front?
Yeah. For me, it's the stories that I tell in the latter 3 quarters of my book,
Mm,
that there are amazing, amazing people out there doing amazing work in the name of Jesus, and these are just the ones that I've discovered and that I was able to, like, meet with them and hear from them and tell their stories. Even since I'm like, "Okay, I can't put any more stories in," have then met a bunch of others like, "Oh, I wish they were in the book." And that's gonna keep happening because the number of amazing folks doing amazing work out there is so much more than the folks, I think, doing it wrong. They're not loud, and I'll say also they're not organized, and that's not a
mm,
fault against them, but an opportunity. And where I'm sort of, I don't wanna say I'm making my own hope, but I'm, uh I'm going after some of that hope, is through some new work that I've been doing, around starting a national faith coalition to end
yeah.
homelessness.
Tell us about
Yeah,
that. I've seen the exciting announcements in social media.
yeah,
Tell us about this coalition and what people can do to support and get involved.
yeah. So, where it came out of this hope, right, of recognizing there are so many people doing amazing things, and they're doing it largely in isolation. You mentioned earlier that practitioners often feel very lonely, and that's so true. And there's so many of them that would just benefit from being in relationship and community with one another.
Mm,
I met so many churches that were at different stages of doing the same thing, right? Like a church that was just starting out considering turning their vacant lot into housing on one side of the country, and on the other side, I met the church that is about to do their ribbon cutting for
mhm,
exactly that, and it's like, I want these folks to be together. I want them to learn from each other, to and then when together, they have the ability to join forces in advocacy, in making some changes in policy at different levels in their community or nationwide. And so out of that just came this idea of a national coalition where we could empower churches who care about this issue to join forces and learn from each other and learn from best practices and to start building bridges to some of the national coalitions that already exist that are not faith-based that are addressing this issue. And so we launched that at the end of last year, a very soft launch. Um, hi, that's my kid is on my wife's phone saying hi. What's up? Hey, Micah. I hope you're being a good listener to mom. Thanks for watching. Um, so that's where the idea came from. And so we've been really building over this year. And the initiative that we're sort of using as like a launching event is this National Homelessness Sunday. And the
mm,
idea is that we would get as many churches across the country to all talk about homelessness on the same day. That's October 11th of this year in their worship to incorporate prayers and liturgies and sermon, show a video that we're hoping to produce to not just talk about homelessness, but to talk about it in good ways and in
mhm,
informed ways, and to break some of the myths around this and then use that not as the end point, but as the starting point of a new movement to address homelessness from a faith-based perspective. So
wow.
that's the idea of National Homelessness Sunday. And if you are a person or a church that wants to get involved, hey, here's Micah. He said, "Hi, Dad," and then he came up. You can check us out at nfceh.org. You hit the heart button.
NFCEH
Yeah.
org.
And
Okay.
yeah, nfceh.org and sign up for our email list. Okay.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. Well, again, if you're a church leader or if you want to get your church leader on board with this National Sunday to end homelessness, yeah, do what Kevin just said. Again, it's nfcah.org. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yep. NFCEH, National Faith Coalition to End Homelessness.
Incredible, incredible. Yeah, go get signed up there. You'll get those resources, and that's incredible, Kevin. It's such a real need, and you know, and I mean, here's an opportunity for your church. Like all our churches would say they care about ending
Mhm.
homelessness, what are we actually doing about it?
Yeah.
Right. And here's an opportunity to get our hearts aligned with the heart of God and with the national church in the US to do it. And I know that there are Canadian churches that have benefited a lot from your work too, Kevin. I constantly run into people doing work among our unhoused neighbors all across Canada who yeah, have really shared appreciation for your writing and your work. So so really really grateful for that, and I would encourage the Canadian churches to also go get signed up and
Yeah.
see what resources are there that you could use to bring the church along. So thanks for sharing that. And Kevin, you also talked about um, something we talked about earlier, which is, it's just so lonely right now if you're a practitioner for justice and you love Jesus. It's just difficult to find spaces and community where you can keep learning and growing and developing and exposing yourself to perspectives of Christians like you in the States, Christians all over the world. So, if that's you, if you're in that season of just being like, I long for connection as a practitioner of justice. I've got a course with St. Stephen's University this summer
Mhm.
called Jesus, Justice, and Empire. It's terrific opportunity
Yeah,
to read. We're going to be reading Palestinian Christians. Yeah, we're going to be reading my book.
yeah,
We're going to be reading, we're going to be reading books and perspectives and hearing voices of the heretics of empire.
yeah,
Uh, because the heretics of empire are the beloved of God, and it's just so much more fun to do it in communities. So to sign up for that, just go to ssU.ca/summer school. And you'll also see a list of other incredible teachers at SSU, St. Stephen's University, teaching summer courses. Someone's teaching a course in Dietrich Bonhoeffer's. Shane Claiborne's teaching an incredible course on
hmm,
the Irresistible Revolution. Lisa Sharon Harper's teaching a course there. So a number
gosh,
of folks,
wow.
teaching
Y'all are
biblical.
loaded. That's a man. Y'all
But
got the Mount Rushmore of theologians out there. That's so cool.
yeah, no, it's exciting, and I appreciate St. Stephen's University so much because, I've just started working there, and our desire is to keep bringing in practitioner voices like yours too, Kevin. Yeah, I could envision a class where I bring you in as a guest lecturer and honor your time for that, because, yeah, I mean, there are people, so many people, like Kevin mentioned, doing the work of justice as practitioners out of their Christian faith in faithful ways, ways that are not being talked about. And it's important to connect those voices, even the voices who will never get book deals, like Kevin
Yeah,
and I did as practitioners. Connect those voices with church leaders and people like you and I and people in our churches so that we can expand our imagination a bit. So thanks everyone for being here, for leaning into the wrestling, the discomfort. Kevin, thank you for writing this much needed book. Um, you know, Books like this, I think, compound over time. I don't think books like this that stretch the imagination um, end up becoming bestsellers as soon as they come out. That's not why we write these books. We write these books to see transformation in the world. And I have no doubt that the right people will continue finding your book, Hope for the Mission, in the years to come. And who knows how that impacts people and influences people, and of course, at the same time, I do want your book to be a bestseller. So everyone, go buy the book. If you're listening to this, let's get it on some bestseller lists as well. And at the same time, recommend this. Read this in your churches, your small
yeah,
groups. Books like Hope for the Mission and The Justice of Jesus are terrific books to disciple your people, your community at church with, because you're not going to disciple or catechize people overnight on these tricky justice issues that require a lot of wrestling, but you can create spaces in your church, like book clubs and small groups, to unpack these theologies and wrestle together. That's the work we've been doing here tonight. We've been wrestling together, probably asking more questions than providing answers or
yeah.
solutions. That's
Well,
where Jesus.
yeah, and if I could tell just a quick example
Please.
that's in the book, um, there's an entire organization that has now been around for a while called Bridge of Hope. This started because a women's Sunday school class at a church in Pennsylvania, um, a YWCA shelter opened nearby, and a couple women who were staying at the shelter started coming to the Sunday school class, which changed the hearts of the women who were in that Sunday school class, who then in a Sunday service stood up and said, "We think that God is leading us to do something about these homeless moms in our community."
Wow.
And they got blessed by the church to do that, and they went and did that, and now over a couple decades later, they're now in multiple states across the country with a really amazing, solid, like, evidence-based model that combines small groups within churches can partner with a professional case manager to all come
Mm.
around a family experiencing homelessness and provide both that professional aspect on the part of the case manager and housing, but also the relational communal aspect that comes with just having a group of people who have your back, right? And
Wow.
so that's just a perfect example of what you're saying, right? That I think there's so much like thinking out there that says like, "Oh, like, I don't think my church is ready to do this thing, and therefore, like, I'm just a person in the pews, like, what impact do I have?" And it really can be as simple as, "Hey, this small group, hey, what if we read this book together?" And you all catch a vision, and then you talk to your pastor about it, and they get on board, and 5 years later, that rundown Sunday school building is now opening as apartments for formerly unhoused people, right? That's so many of the stories that I heard in this. It's not always a new pastor comes in and decides to change the mission. It's something that the spirit like bubbles up within a few people, and then what happens happens.
It's beautiful. Love that, Kevin. Yeah, some of my most encouraging moments as an author now have been getting to visit book clubs that gather at
Yeah,
churches
totally.
virtually in person and just see how people are processing it and how they're drawing learnings for their context that are beyond our imaginations when we wrote the books, right? So,
Yeah,
like, it's just such a good way to get your church community engaged and wrestling and thinking by reading books like Hope for the Mission. And so, yeah, get your church, get your pastor, your priest, your church leaders to start a small group to read Hope for the Mission and the Justice of Jesus for kind of a more big
mm,
picture thing. But yeah, I do think, and you and I have both talked about our books as good accompaniment books in the
yeah,
past, because the reality is the Justice of Jesus is quite like broad in its it's an undergirding lens and theology to do the work of justice as the church, and your book then goes narrow in
yeah,
focus, and it's
exactly.
like, what are we doing about this injustice that's affecting all our church communities, all our neighborhoods across, you know, if you live in a city across North America. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, and one thing I want to one thought I want to say as we close here too is as we talk about decolonizing homelessness ministries in the church, I can't help but think of our indigenous neighbors in North
yeah,
America because anyone who works in, anyone who works in homelessness ministries will tell you that, yeah, especially in Canada, not sure what the numbers are in the States, but a large chunk of our neighbors who are unhoused are indigenous. Um, and it's essentially, re-traumatizing them and recolonizing them when we do things like insisting on evangelism, before they're fed or housed. And so, so it's important for us to not repeat the patterns of history. Um, and that's another reason why it's important to ground ourselves in hope by grounding ourselves in lament. And you invite us to do that so well in Hope for the Mission. So, again, final plug from my end, Hope for the Mission, available wherever you get your books. Oh,
yeah,
thanks, Kevin.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, read it, recommend it, leave a review, and get your church to read it as well. And if you don't find yourself at a church because the church isn't welcoming, but you're connected with other people who want to wrestle with this, read it in community with them too. But thank you all for joining us, Kevin. Thanks for being a part of this conversation here, but also the larger conversation, serving our unhoused neighbors and all the incredible work you do as an author and a practitioner. And yeah, looking forward to seeing the impact of this book in the days ahead.
Thanks so much, and I'm such a admirer of everything you do and your book, and honored to be here on Masala Chai Theology. I had to wait till the end to say this, but I'm allergic to chai because
Oh, no.
I know, 'cause I'm allergic to cinnamon, so I can't have chai. But I knew if I said that too early, you might just boot me off. So
No, 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 that's very valid, and I'm so glad that even though you can't consume the chai, you can still have the chai of theology.
that's
You
right.
can still
This
breathe
is
in the aroma that way.
yeah,
No, that's good. Thank you for flagging that, and, yeah, it's important to be inclusive in every way, so
that's
I'm
right.
glad that we at least get to have chai this way, with
Right.
everyone here together. Alright. Blessings, brother. Take care, and, we'll be in touch.
All right.
Alright.
All right.